In an effort to combat influencer hype, we started a talk about how to read health and nutrition studies. Last week, we took a look at some basic concepts as well as the structure of studies. This week, we're focusing more on the results and the interpretation of those results. And at the end, we try to apply these concepts on an actual study about veganism.
So I actually removed section 7, controlling for other factors, because I felt like it was just a kind of separate standalone piece that's not just the basics of how to interpret and understand a study.
Right.
It definitely is important, and I think it's better to cover that in a separate podcast.
I think that's fine.
Okay. I know you were looking forward to it.
I was.
I'm so
Was
sorry.
all giddy about it for days.
But
It's like, can't wait for number 7.
I did that because I was also considering adding another section about what causation means in these kinds of studies.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're like, causation, it's obvious, but
I am.
I think it's commonly misunderstood. So I think it warrants a separate episode.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll do that at a future date. Okay. So where were we? So we are at section 5, how results are reported.
Last week we did the first 4, and now we're going to do the last 3.
Correct. Okay. So let's get into this section. In the previous episode, the last section we did was how the studies are structured, where to find things, and now I'm going to talk about how the results are reported. So what kind of metrics are in studies usually, and I'll talk a little bit about the metrics and what they mean and give some understanding of them, but some of them in themselves would require like a full hour talking about like exactly how you calculate them and what's wrong with some versions of them and how they can be misinterpreted. So I don't want to go too deep into any single one.
Yeah, I think that would be outside of how to read scientific studies scope.
Yeah. So this is just the basics of the usual ones you see and just a quick understanding of them. All right. So the first section I've got is just metrics that describe a population. So just simply things like counts, like how many people have this thing, this disease, and they're just, raw numbers, nothing much in there. And on top of that, you can have the percent or the proportion of that population that has a disease. Within like 100 people, maybe 5% of them have a disease. Incidence is something where you kind of are looking at a set time period and you say, how many new diseases do we see in this year? Something like that. So the thing here is that it's not a prevalence, which is the next one. It's not like how many people in total have the disease. So the difference between this incidence and prevalence is just that, let's say you're talking about year 2023, how many people got the disease in 2023 versus the prevalence would be how many people have it and had it before in 2023. Does that make sense?
Somewhat. Like, does it... prevalence is just how many without any time constraints?
Generally, yeah. Like you just take a snapshot and say, at this point, we know this many people have the disease.
I thought prevalence was kind of like how common it is.
Right, the same thing, yeah.
Okay.
But the incidence is like the new cases that arise in this time span.
Incidence feels kind of like a count.
Oh, yeah. It is a count, yeah.
Okay. But with like, you generally assign a time period to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And prevalence is, you also have to count the thing but usually you'd say it's a percent of the total.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. And rates are usually some sort of time aspect in there that's kind of combined with that prevalence sort of. So it's like 10 events per 1,000 person years, which sounds weird, but it's just multiplying like the number of people times the time period that you're looking at.
Okay.
Standardized rates, they can just standardize these rates based on age, and like it's kind of like controlling for age within rates. Don't worry about it too much.
I wasn't.
Okay. So one thing that you'll often see in studies is measuring differences between groups, and this slide talks about what metrics are usually used for that. Often you'll see just a simple mean difference, and that's just like you take one group's average and subtract it by the other group's average. And here the example is just -5 millimeters mercury in blood pressure. So it's just saying the difference between the groups is -5.
Is this what is commonly referred to as delta?
Delta is any change, any difference, basically.
Okay.
It definitely can be, for sure.
Right.
And median is just the same thing, but it's just using the median. No big difference. Percent change is just you get the percent change instead of the raw absolute difference. So here's the example. You're just looking at difference from baseline, from a treatment group versus a control. And let's say at the end of the study, the treatment group has 180 of whatever value, and the control group has 200. So that means the treatment resulted in 10% difference, 10% lower than the control group.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's talk about understanding and comparing risk. So what metrics do we use to describe like the risk that you'll develop heart disease or hypertension or type 2 diabetes or something like that? And if you're talking about one group, that's just describing that one group. So you can say just your absolute risk, that's just not related to anything else. It's just a type of like prevalence almost. So you're saying the chance in this one group that you have a disease is 1%, because in the study they counted it up and they saw that 1% of the people had this disease. And it's basically just a basic statistic.
Yeah. And
odds are just the ratio of events to non-events. So like 1 to 9 odds is like you have a 10% chance. So
for every 1% that have it, 9 don't.
9 don't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now you can use those metrics to then create some comparison between different groups of those risks. The first one is just absolute risk reduction. So if you're looking at like treatment and control groups, you can say, okay, one group, their risk was only 2%. And then the treatment group, let's say that risk went all the way to 1%. So the difference is 1% in absolute terms. Mm-hmm. A similar metric is this relative risk, which is just those two groups, but you look at what's the change in percent there.
Right.
And that in the same situation would say, okay, it's a 50% lower risk in the treatment group. Now, this is always often overblown in the media, where there'll be like a study that says this thing increases cancer by 50%.
Right.
When they say it in that way, it's always talking about the relative risk.
Right.
And that could mean a lot to a particular person, or it could mean almost nothing.
Right.
You have to know what the absolute risk is to determine if it means anything.
Of course.
Practically. Because the absolute risk could be like, you have an absolute risk of having the disease of like 0.00001%.
Yeah. And then a 50%
50% on top of that. Exactly. Yeah. Odds ratio is similar. You're just comparing two odds. So it's just what it is basically.
Could you give an example of odds ratio?
Let's talk about odds in the decimal way, because it's just a bit easier with this example. Mm-hmm. So if we have our control group has an odds of 0.111 and our treatment group has an odds of 0.222, that those odds, it's double the control to the treatment. So that odds ratio is simply 2.
Right.
Because the odds are twice as likely in the treatment group. Does that make sense?
I'm sure it does, but not intuitively.
I agree. I much prefer to talk about it in just probability.
Yeah.
Where you simply look at like 1 out of 10 people versus 2 out of 10 or whatever. But odds are useful in some modeling, like logistic regression uses an odds in it. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it.
Okay.
It's similar to just a probability, but it's not exactly the same. People who gamble probably have a better intuition about odds. But I don't. So I don't have that. Number needed to treat is actually pretty straightforward. It's on average, how many people do we need to, for example, take the pill for it to work, for it to treat the person. So let's say there's a pill that reduces heart attacks. How many people need to take that pill before we see one less heart attack? Because it's all about probabilities.
Right.
It's not going to treat everybody in the same way. So it's just a common metric that's used that kind of shows how helpful and effective a treatment can be.
Yeah. So as an example, if I'm getting this right, there's this pill that reduces heart attacks. And if its number needed to treat is 5, that means that it reduces heart attacks by 0.2.
Okay, it's because you prevented 1 heart attack, and you're saying out of the 5.
Yeah. So each pill you give reduces it by 0.2.
For each person, they have a less.
I know you'll either have the heart attack or not, but like, is that the kind of language that you would use to arrive at this number?
That you're getting there, yeah, but because usually not everybody's going to have a heart attack. Like there's a absolute risk within that population. So you're kind of skipping a step that doesn't account for the absolute risk. Okay. Which is fine. You've got the right idea, but it's just one more step that you'd have to figure out.
Okay.
But that's the main idea.
I got it. Yeah. I think I got it.
Okay. Now we can talk about tracking outcomes over time. The previous ones didn't specifically have a time component in there. And these metrics always have some sort of time component. The first one is just related to what we talk about.
Is it just going to be all the same things, but like over time?
No, there's a slightly different term. Right. So the first one, is like that, where it's just new cases over person years, which is very similar, to just people during a specific time period. But one thing that is kind of different is this hazard ratio, which is just the event rate over time, which is very similar, I know, but that's just the terminology in the studies. That's what the hazard is, the hazard ratio.
Okay.
Because obviously time is very important in any of these studies. One interesting visualization that you'll see in some studies is called a survival curve, which is literally, it can be literally what is stated there. In the beginning of the chart, you'll have, let's say there are 100 people in the study, and every time somebody dies, it'll go down a little. And this is over time. And then it'll go down more when the next person dies and keep going down. And that's why it's called a survival curve. And just so this is more obvious, it doesn't have to be just about death. It can be just time to event, of course.
Okay.
But this kind of analysis is called a Kaplan-Meier analysis. And this is just a nice chart that I think really visualizes this idea of survival over time. So like this was a study just on obesity, malnutrition, and the prevalence and outcome of hypertension. So this one is just looking at the survival for patients with hypertension based on their diet and if they were obese. So you can see that the red line is if the patients were lean and well nourished, and the kind of sky blue is if they were obese and well nourished. And those lines are actually pretty close, which is interesting. Yeah. But if they're malnourished, you'd expect the survival curve to be, much steeper, which it is. But if they're obese, there's kind of a protective effect of them being obese.
Oh.
You see how the green is the worst one, basically. Yeah. Remember, this is in like not a healthy population, so. But it isn't. I really like these curves. They're just really interesting visualizations of this kind of data.
I mean, lean and well nourished are healthy, no?
Yeah, but I think all of them have hypertension.
Right. Okay.
Right. And then the last bit is just about summarizing multiple studies, what metrics we use for that, the meta-analysis type studies. And one common one is a standardized mean difference, which is just often the studies they're looking at have different scales in the whatever metrics they looked at. So you have to normalize them to be able to compare them well.
Yeah.
Other metric is nice visualization called a forest plot, which I think we showed some in a previous, I think the kombucha had.
I think either the kombucha episode or the statistical concepts everyone should know episode.
Yeah, and I'll just show an example of one. This is from a meta-analysis on saturated fat restriction for cardiovascular disease prevention.
Okay.
Pretty recent one. And this one here is just showing the forest plot for saturated fatty acid reduction trials on myocardial infarction, heart attack. And you can see in, only 6 trials they have. Overall, when you combine them, there's no statistically significant effect of reducing saturated fat. But like I said, don't take this at face value. It's very easy to say, okay, well, that means there's no effect. It's a meta-analysis, the highest standard we have on randomized controlled trials. But if you look at the confidence interval, it's 0.71 to 1.02. And since it crosses 1, we say it's not significant.
Right, now, but it's clearly lower.
Just this alone, okay, there might be something there, but we just don't have enough data to be precise enough about it. But I would also caution against just taking this at face value, whichever way you want to interpret it, yes or no saturated fat, because if you look at the studies, 5 of the 6 are from the 60s. There's only one that's not. And the one in 2016 looks like there weren't any events. So it's really not, that one's not even like included, basically. It's not even in the chart. And I've looked at some of these studies from the 60s and they're like not well done.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, like, there's always more to the story with these, these kinds of things. And however you interpret that either there is a signal or there isn't, there's still more problems behind the scenes.
Right.
Yeah, it's never easy.
Last time I said I like meta-analyses because they like point out flaws in other studies.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking, to make sure that a meta-analysis is good, you'd have to, like, really, you have to check every study that they included. Whereas if you found one well-done randomized control trial, it's probably fine.
It's it's a difficult thing to compare. Obviously, if every study in the meta-analysis is garbage, the common expression garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know that until you actually look at the studies and figure that out.
Exactly.
But you have the same problem with a single study. You have to look at that single study.
Yeah, but if I look at a single study, then I'm looking at a single study. If I'm looking at a meta-analysis, I'm looking at the meta-analysis plus like 5 different studies.
Yeah, but at least you have the studies right there and you can quickly find them. Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's not easy, but
Well, hopefully some of this will make it a little easier.
Hopefully. All right. So just in the end, to have some quick questions about, if you're looking at a study, you just want to figure out what's the main metric they're using to answer the question, and then what are the metrics they use for any secondary outcomes and things like that. Is the metric appropriate? Could it hide something? Could it, overemphasize something? Like, could it appear to have an overestimation of risk, like especially that relative risk that we talked about? Are they clear to give you both of those in the study? Because I've seen studies where they only give you the relative risk and they will not tell you it's just not there. And that is very annoying. You have to go through the tables and calculate it yourself.
That's psychotic.
I mean, it's not difficult. It's just that really annoying that they wouldn't just put it in there.
If a paper didn't do that, I would just assume they're hiding something.
I would definitely look at it more carefully. Yeah, for sure. So let's quickly look at the study. We were looking at this cardiometabolic effects of omnivorous versus vegan diets in identical twins. And all we want to do here is find what are those metrics that they're using.
Okay.
And often they will say that in the methods, but here they might, I think they actually will say that in the main outcomes and measures. So it's basically a difference in low density lipoprotein cholesterol concentration from baseline to endpoint. But to be more specific, for the primary analysis, we investigated differences between groups in the change from baseline to week 8 for LDL-C between vegan and omnivorous diets among identical twins. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
So in each group, there's going to be some change from baseline to the week 8, and they're looking at what's the difference between those changes in the two groups. And it's similar for all the secondary outcomes. Yeah, so the secondary outcomes, they're just looking at, mean differences, mean decrease, mean increase. So, and those are pretty common metrics. If you understand those, that's probably, I don't know, at least half of the studies out there like this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's what I've seen the most.
And I would just say, if you don't understand a metric in a study, just look it up. There are only so many that are commonly used, and once you get a basic understanding of a few, that'll do you for 99% of the studies out there. The next section is on interpreting those results. And an important part about that is the effect real and how precise is that effect? So we do this in looking at p-values and confidence intervals generally. So yes, we're going to talk about p-values.
Right.
Okay, so I've got this short table, only about two concepts here that are just statistical significance and precision. And statistical significance is just looking at the p-value. And we're basically looking at, is this result due to chance versus a real effect? So the example here is just, okay, the supplement reduces blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury with a p-value of 0.03. You will always see a p-value or confidence interval with those metrics that are reported that we talked about. Mm-hmm. The other one is precision. So that's like we saw in that forest plot, like the width of that diamond, like that's kind of the confidence interval. That's how precise our estimate is of that metric. And that'll be reported like right there, 5 millimeters of mercury with the confidence interval from -8 to -2. And generally, you see that -8 to -2, it doesn't cross 0. Generally, if it doesn't cross 0, it's statistically significant.
Okay.
I do want to state that p-values, the actual definition can be complicated.
Right.
But in practice, you just want to look at, is it significant? Is it under that 0.05 threshold? And how much is it under? Is it close to that threshold? That's just a...
Should we say that p-value less than 0.05 means that there's less than a 5% chance that the results were due to chance?
That's a okay definition. Yeah. for a non-statistician, or that's fine. Do you want the formal definition?
Yes.
Okay, so the formal definition is that a p-value is the probability under a specified statistical model that a statistical summary of the data, like the sample mean difference between groups, would be equal to or more extreme than its observed value.
Okay.
Just to be clear, this statistical significance versus non-significance is just a threshold test. It's if the p-value is below 0.05. And that is a convention. There's nothing like magic or special about this number of 0.05. It was just something that was used historically, and it doesn't not make sense.
Sure.
But it's not like if you see one that's like 0.049, it's like, yes.
Right.
But if it's 0.051, it's like, that's nothing.
Garbage.
Yeah. And the p-value alone can mean nothing practically.
Of course. If the results were nothing changed.
Yeah. If it changed almost, if there was almost no change, and that change was, you had like a high enough number of people in the study where you could say it is mathematically different between these two groups, but like clinically, practically, the change doesn't do anything. One thing that you, I guess, had alluded to is that the p-value doesn't mean the probability of the result being true. I just want to state that it's more complicated than that. Yeah. Okay. And usually you'll see a metric with the p-value that's under 0.05 and is significant.
I just want to package it in a way, and you let me know if this is good enough. So the p-value is a number that's usually reported with the results that represents the probability that the reported results are due to chance. And generally, historically or conventionally, 0.05 is used as a threshold. And if it's under 0.05, then it means that there's less than 5% probability that the results we got were due to chance. But it's good to look at the p-value and not just see it as a threshold that they have set, because 0.06 could still be a real change, and it's quite close to 5%. And it also matters a lot what the results that it's representing are saying.
Yeah.
So it's good to look at all these things and understand what they mean to form an opinion, as opposed to just looking at either just the result or just looking whether it made it below 0.05.
Yeah, definitely. The p-value doesn't say anything specific about how large the effect size is.
Of course, if I came to you and said I did this amazing study on veganism and we got a p-value of 0.03 and didn't tell you anything else,
yeah,
be like, what?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so all this is saying is, okay, the metric we found, this is, for example, like weight loss. So between two groups, there was a weight difference after 12 weeks of 0.15 kilograms, which is almost nothing.
Right.
But we got a p-value of 0.001, which is technically statistically significant, but that doesn't mean anything practically.
Right.
I mean,
in practice, I know it's a hypothetical, but wouldn't you need like thousands of people for this to be?
You would definitely need a lot of people. I'm not sure how many exactly. Okay. definitely hundreds for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to do just with the number of people. It has to do with the variation in the sample. So if theoretically, everybody in the sample had the exact same weight loss and it happened to be 0.15, you wouldn't need so many people.
Of course.
Yeah, something like that. But on the opposite side, if you see something that like this is a difference of 8.5 millimeters mercury of systolic blood pressure, but the p-value is only 0.09, which technically isn't statistically significant. But let's imagine that you only had 30 people in the study. Could just be you needed more people, and there is a real effect, but you just need more people. Generally, takeaway is if there's a p-value, just make sure you also know the effect size. Let's see. So just some questions to ask when you're looking at a paper about statistical significance and confidence intervals. You just want to look, do they report the p-value, and not just is it statistically significant or not, like how close is it to the threshold, because that could tell you a lot. Also, what does the confidence interval tell you? How wide is it? Is it wide due to not enough people or subjects, or is there just a lot of variation in the data? Is the effect size big enough to matter? And always, if whatever metric, if it's p-value or confidence interval, if what you're looking at is kind of on the borderline of significant or not, or on that, does it cross the one in the confidence interval or whatever, what's the reason there? It could mean what you're looking at is a real effect, but there's just not enough people, and there was too much variation in the data, or it could mean that there's actually no effect.
Right.
And you might not be able to figure that out by that one study. Then you might need more data, more studies.
Right.
Let's look at our vegan diet study, and we are just going to find, is there a p-value or confidence interval in there? So let's go down to the results section. the primary outcome, we'll see here that the participants receiving the vegan diet showed a mean, that's standard deviation, decrease of 13.9 milligrams per deciliter. And here they have 95% confidence interval, which is negative 25 to negative 2.4. So you can see effect size is 13.9. Confidence interval ranges from negative 25 to 2. So that is something, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you would need more information to know if that 13.9 reduction is an effect size that you think is meaningful.
Right. I have no idea what that means, but it's obviously a significant decrease.
Now, you might see something missing here.
The p-value?
Right. There's no p-value. Why not? Good question. So many journals are actually trying to move away from just showing a p-value because of this problem with it being just a threshold of yes or no. And they prefer to just report the confidence interval.
That was going to be my guess. I thought, isn't the confidence interval kind of a
significance test anyway? Yeah. And that's just, I think that's why they just don't specifically state it here.
What do you think about this movement?
I don't see any problem in reporting it. In addition here, like you could say that, and then with a p-value of 0.02, that's fine. There's no negative to do that.
Okay.
The problem they're trying to fix is that many people would look for
0.05.
Getting a p-value below the threshold, and they just wouldn't publish if it wasn't under the threshold, and that can lead to lots of studies that maybe should have been published not being published, because it's always more exciting to find a positive result than a null result,
right?
Usually.
But my question is, what do you think of moving away from? Because to me, it makes sense.
I think it's probably a good thing overall.
Okay.
Yeah. You can find the p-value down in this chart, LDLC p-value, but as you can see, it's not like a highlight. It's not.
Yeah, when you said they didn't show it, since I know from last time that these guys were pretty thorough with their reporting, they wouldn't just leave out something.
No, yeah, it's not like they were like, oh, the p-value is not high enough. Let's just show it
casually.
They're low enough. Yeah. It's just not the main thing they're reporting anymore, which I think is generally a good thing.
Yeah, I can respect that.
Sometimes depends on the journal. I wouldn't say it's across the board in all of these studies.
Is the effect big enough to matter in real life?
Okay, so I don't want to answer that regarding that study.
Why not?
Because, the answer is it depends. So there's your answer.
All right, fair enough. We can stick to.
Okay, that's actually the main presentation about how to understand and interpret a study.
Okay.
I will finish up with some core questions, like a summary of all the questions we have that we asked, but just the main ones. And then following this, I'll want to talk about some common pitfalls in studies.
Yeah.
So just core questions to quickly go through. What's the main question that the study's trying to answer? Is it is it the question that you care about? Is it actually the question that the headline or the influencer says they're answering? Often it's not. The next one is who or what, and of course, how many was studied and how relevant is that to you? that's a very important thing that's often glossed over.
How would you assess that?
How relevant is that to you?
Like, I'm saying within humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you saw a study of 100 Chinese pregnant women.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Would you be like, I'm not a Chinese pregnant woman?
Unfortunately, you know what the answer is going to be.
Okay.
It depends on what the study's on and what it's about and what they're studying.
Does that come down to common sense?
Some of it is common sense. Obviously, if they're specifically studying something about pregnancy, it's probably not that relevant to you. Okay. But if they're studying something just like, I don't know, did you say they were pregnant?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, even then it becomes...
No, the study had nothing to do with pregnancy. That was the population.
Right, okay. Yeah, then it's still less obvious that it's not relevant, but it still is...
It could be relevant.
It could be.
Yeah.
But you would probably want, ideally, something... It's more I guess in that situation, it's more the pregnancy that would probably mean it's less relevant to you.
Like if this study showed that smoking really harmed all of them.
Okay, yes. That's very nice. Okay, not commenting on the ethical aspects of the study. In that case, yeah, probably that would still apply to you. I don't know specifically, like if it's studying, I don't know, some lung function, you probably could at least... It would have at least some application to you.
Yeah. So.
All right. How can I?
Moving on.
Then, of course, you want to determine what kind of study design is it? How strong of a design is it? The basics are, is it just an associative study, like observational, or can it actually test a cause, like a interventional study, randomized controlled trial, or does it synthesize evidence? And if it does, what kind of studies is it looking at? And next, you want to look at what are the metrics they're looking at to answer the questions they have, and what do those metrics show, and what might they not show? What might you miss by just looking at that metric? Can you look more in detail at the underlying data? You know, one thing, metrics are often just based on averages. Sometimes there's more interesting things in the distribution, the full distribution of the data, because you don't know exactly where you would be in that distribution. Like we talked about, how strong are the results? Are they practically meaningful to you, or are they just statistically significant but not really of practical relevance? And that you will need a bit of knowledge on the specific thing they're measuring, and if you see a decrease in it, how much is actually practically meaningful. And that sometimes they will state that in the study, but sometimes that takes more digging.
Okay.
And the last one I'll mention is just when you're reading the study, are there any clear red flags, like kind of statistical tricks, like testing tons of different metrics and like focus on just one? Or are there tons of subgroup analyses where they like look at 10 different subgroups and they find, oh, this one subgroup has some unique thing. We get a statistically significant result from that one subgroup.
Right.
But does that mean anything? Or are they just looking for something in the data? And then, of course, conflicts of interest, which can mean something, but not necessarily.
As we discussed in the previous episode.
Yeah. Okay. So the last bit is just about how studies can mislead and what are some common pitfalls and also that influencers can do the same thing, of course, and some common things that they do. We've talked about some of them, of course. One thing is that you'll often have like a small sample size. You get a statistically significant result and it looks large, but maybe it's just there was one outlier in the study that pulled the whole average way up. And they published that and were like, yay.
On average, it went up.
On average, it went up significantly.
Right.
And if you actually had more people in the study, you'd see that effect reduces.
Yeah.
One that's common, it's becoming less common now, but that the placebo is not actually a placebo. There were I remember some randomized controlled trials. I think it was studying possibly omega-3 supplementation. Not sure, but the placebo that they used was like mineral oil. And mineral oil, they later figured out, could have negative health effects. And that made it look like the treatment, the omega-3 was much better than it actually was. I can't remember the specifics on that study, but there was one that definitely used mineral oil, and the results looked better than they would have.
Okay.
We've talked a bit about publication bias, that if there's a null result, it's less likely that the study will be published because it's just less exciting. And there's a study that looked at the p-values in studies. Yeah. And if you look at the distribution of p-values, you'll see there's a curious bump in the right below 0.5 threshold.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't happen, like.
Of course.
Yeah. But and it might lead you to take fewer supplements if they actually published all the null results. Right.
Probably also a lot of meta-analyses don't have access to all the... Not probably, they miss out on a lot of data that they could have otherwise taken into
if it's not published, they don't have it. Yeah. We talked about conflicts of interest with funding, but also you will have sometimes researchers who are like just stuck on their pet theory that they just want to prove, and you'll see them like just doing whatever they can to back it up in the research study, and they'll somehow try to like massage the data to like show a positive result for their pet theory. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we talked a bit about kind of multiple, like if you see that there are tons of different comparisons, that can be okay if it's an exploratory study, like we said, but sometimes it's not shown to be, and they'll just be looking for some significant p-value in there. Same thing with the subgroups. That's really common. Just be aware of that. And also be aware that if it's not an exploratory study, and even if it's an exploratory study, there are ways to statistically correct for doing those multiple tests, which should lower the p-value threshold in some way. And often they just ignore that. So it's just good to be aware of that.
Gotcha.
And so this self-reported or recall data is a commonly cited problem with nutrition or diet studies, that often dietary studies, the data that they look at will come from the participants self-reporting or remembering their diet from like the last day or the last week. And those reports are definitely not 100% accurate, which is okay, but it can lead to a lot of issues, I guess. A lot of noise. There's ways to do it better and worse.
Okay.
And over the years, it's become better, this kind of, self-reporting data, especially with now you can do it with apps and tracking. Like you can even like take pictures now and, have that be involved in the study, but it's slow and it's just a common problem. It doesn't totally invalidate these type of studies, but it's just good
Something to look out for.
something to be aware of for sure. Lack of blinding in dietary studies. Let's say you're testing 2 diets. The participants, you can't really blind the participants. And so blinding means they don't know what they're taking.
Right.
Like with a drug, it's pretty easy.
Right.
With a diet, how can you blind a vegan versus carnivore diet?
Right.
Impossible. Unless you blend it. No. No, but you can't. Then it introduces another variable. Yeah.
The blending.
Yeah. So this I don't think you can get around, but it doesn't. Again, it's just to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Another thing what I have here, surrogate does not equal clinical outcome. I think this is important to be aware of. Like, there are so many new studies coming out with like these aging clocks where they'll do some kind of DNA methylation analysis and combine lots of different metrics, and you'll get this aging, like your biological age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've probably seen those tests you can do. Yeah. And while they are very interesting and probably have some predictive value, it's still not totally clear that they work very robustly and actually mean something. So what I'm saying here is, let's say you do some experiment and you see, okay, the treatment group has 2 years less on their biological age based on this clock. That's interesting, but that isn't a hard clinical outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't yet know if these clocks we don't know how good they are, because, you would have to follow the people ideally for the rest of their lives.
Right.
But they are interesting and do correlate generally with better health. But
I see.
it's just another thing to be aware of. Now more on what influencers can do and common things that they might promote, but when it's not really what the data says.
Yeah.
So they will often read a new study or a new headline and they'll just flat out say, don't do this or take this supplement, when it's just based on one study.
Right.
Implying that study is the end all be all of the supplement, and we don't need any more research, when usually we do. There's commonly this petri dish hype or mechanistic hype where they just have a study where they're just looking at a cell model in a petri dish, and the influencers just doesn't mention that.
Right.
These are often like a study increases inflammation, or a study increases cancer genes, or increases genes that promote cancer, things like that. But they neglect to mention it's in a petri dish, and it's unclear if that would have any real outcome in a human. One thing that can add a lot of noise and muddiness to health claims is that you'll often have groups promoting a diet as being healthy, but it's really based on this kind of morality. And I guess here I'm talking mostly about vegans, which, not saying it's not a moral thing to want to, protect animals and have animals have better lives. But that doesn't say anything necessarily about how good a diet is.
Of course.
It just can introduce a lot of bias.
Yeah.
And if you're just upfront about that, okay, fine. They do it on the other side in a different sort of way, but it's still a bias.
The carnivore diet?
I'm not saying they're promoting it as a moral thing, but that maybe they promote it as kind of the how to put it.
I think I know where you're going.
I think you know what I mean. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
This is just a common thing, the relative risk versus absolute risk. I don't think we have to explain that. We already went over that. And similarly, association does not mean causation. This is commonly just ignored, that they just say this causes this. And then you look at the study and it's an observational study, and they shouldn't say it causes it.
I think most people don't distinguish. They just don't know.
Either they don't know or they don't care, and they think it's not important to distinguish.
Some influences are worse than others. On the worst end, I think they might not even have thought that something being associated with something doesn't necessarily mean it causes it, and what that even means.
Right, I agree. I would say, the worst of them just don't care. They just want more views. Yeah. But some should know better. Of course. The common thing where they have a study and then they'll have an anecdote like, I took the supplement and I feel so much better, but that doesn't mean anything necessarily.
An anecdote is at best a study of one person, usually self-reported.
Mm-hmm. And usually highly biased.
Right.
If I tried to make a study on myself, I wouldn't apply that. I wouldn't say that that's like a statistically valid study, that you should necessarily take anything from it other than a suggestion of like, hey, look into this. But anecdotes are so good at getting, like, they even get me.
Yeah, for sure. One
thing that influencers will often do is they won't even read the study. They'll just read a headline about the study and they'll make the video about the headline. And the headline mischaracterizes what's in the study. So it's just making quick content without looking at the source, which is pretty common. Okay, that's the common pitfalls about what influencers do to mislead and what the studies themselves might do to mislead.
I think association isn't causation is the one I see the most.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the Petri dish one.
Yeah, I agree. Those are everywhere. Okay, the last thing, I'm going to simplify everything into three things to remember when you're looking at a study. Okay. First thing, just know the study's main question. It's the foundation of the whole study. Don't rely on that headline or the influencer. You have to at least look at the study if it's important to you. The second thing is understand a bit about the study design. Is it observational? Is it interventional? What can the results tell you then, and how should you interpret them? But also remember, it's just one study. Try to take into account the full body of evidence if there's other studies as well. The third one is just learn a bit about the basic statistics and about how they're used in studies, because the results of a study are only as strong as the statistical analysis behind them. If the statistical analysis is crappy, the conclusions are also crappy. And you really, just by understanding some really basic stuff that we went over, like p-values, confidence intervals.
So, episode we had about basic statistical concepts that everyone should know, I think would be helpful.
That could definitely be helpful, yeah.
And we should have a part 2 of that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, just those basics, they really go a long way.
Cool.
All right. You want to finish up on the vegan study?
All right.
All right. So I'll just now talk more overall about this study. And we did look at the outcome, which was a decrease in the LDL levels on the vegan diet. So that was a mean decrease of 13.9 milligrams per deciliter of LDL cholesterol. Now, generally, especially after only 8 weeks, that's a pretty good reduction. I would say that is clinically meaningful. I don't want to get into the whole LDL debate.
Sure.
But that is a strong reduction after only 8 weeks. So this study was done, 2023, November 30th, 2023 is when it was published. And this was actually part of a documentary. So you might have seen on Netflix, there was a documentary. It was called You Are What You Eat.
I have not.
I didn't watch it as well. So none of this is about that documentary. That's a whole nother thing, which definitely did sensationalize the study and the results. But just looking at the study, overall, it's a pretty solid study. I can't say that there's any obvious statistical red flags. They modeled the data well. It appears that they were very careful in collecting the data. I don't see any obvious bias in how they set up the experiment or the analysis of the data. And I don't see any clear overhyping of results in the study. However, there was a lot of pushback on social media back when it was published. Some of that was about the documentary, but some of it was actually specific to just the study, because the study came out a bit earlier than the documentary. Okay. And I think there was only one, really valid criticism, and that has to do with the way they designed the study. So this is in the limitations section. So right here, our study was not designed to be isocaloric. Thus, changes to LDL-C cannot be separated from weight loss observed in the study. So you probably didn't even think to consider that.
I did not.
Well, actually, if you look at the supplementary materials, which are available, it's not like they hid it.
Right.
And they specifically said in the design, the design is not meant to be the same calories per group.
Right.
So on average, the vegan group, they ate 200 calories less per day than the omnivorous group. So does this change your opinion of the outcome?
I think it does.
I think it might. However, their argument was that they didn't tell people how much to eat. Yeah, they provided the meals for the first month and then told people keep eating in this way for the next month, basically.
And for the first month, were the calories?
They were allowed to eat snacks, so it wasn't like they were only allowed to eat what they were given. This was free living,
Right, but the meals that they were given, were they calorically similar?
They were definitely similar, but they could just eat more of them, you know.
Ah.
And they could eat snacks as they wanted to.
Hmm.
And it's not like they were required to eat those meals. They would just eat them as much as they wanted to. So
Okay.
you could say that, okay, eating a vegan diet naturally lowers calories.
Yeah.
Which
That's
isn't
what I'm thinking.
which isn't bad, you know.
No, it's not. It's like, how much does it matter is the...
Right. Is that the reason LDL was decreased in the vegan group? It is definitely possible.
What I mean is, I don't know if I'm getting this across. Like, if I'm considering becoming vegan and LDL is my main outcome, like I need to reduce my LDL. Should I be vegan or not? I might still consider it because I don't care if it came from less calories or not. In the end, that was the result.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a interesting, I guess, wrinkle in this study.
It is interesting, yes.
Yeah. And of course, many people on the other side were like, you didn't report that, you hid that, you know, you're trying to just promote that vegan diets is better and burying the perhaps actual cause of the decrease in LDL. I think that maybe I would have liked to see clearly stated the vegan diet had 200 calories less on average in the main study, like right here in the limitation. However, I don't think they're purposefully like trying to hide this.
That's just not what
fact.
they were measuring.
It's just not how they designed the study.
But I see there also, I mean, it sucks that it's such a charged topic. Which it shouldn't be, but
no.
Couldn't you theoretically use the raw data to like normalize for...
You could potentially do some exploration to try to account for that, but it would depend on the data. Remember, there's only 22 pairs of twins. I'm not sure if there's enough data to really tease that out here. And it would change. I don't think you could. I doubt that you could actually do that with the data here.
Oh, okay.
You might be able to get some signal, but I don't think you'd have any clear conclusion.
You wouldn't debunk it.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, like they say clearly here, the study is designed as a free living study, and that they want to take into account how people behave on these different diets when they're not told specifically you have to eat like 2,000 calories a day.
I mean, I see the point in doing this as well.
Yeah.
Because as I said, like if I'm thinking whether or not I should be vegan, I'm not considering calorie counting. That's a whole different experiment.
Right. It would also, as a follow-up, would be interesting to see that. Basically the same study, but hold calories constant as much as possible.
Sure.
But then there's other problems. What if the macronutrients, the protein, the carbs, and the fats are different? Then you get like
how
is it because of that? And then if you then you can go deeper into those. Like, well, what if it was because of a certain type of fat or a certain acids? Yeah, it's like. Yeah, so you can. Those are the problems that they would come up. Those are the problems that would arise if they tried to do it the other way. Like, imagine they did try to keep calories constant between both groups, and they got a result that said the vegans had lower LDL on average, then you would just have the other side saying, well, it's because there's some, like they had more processed foods in the omnivorous group than the vegans. The carbohydrates were more simple sugars, or, it's like,
right. They didn't eat raw steak every day or something.
yeah, they didn't have enough. I don't know. So, yeah. So it's just, all of these things is why nutrition studies are really not
Mess.
easy and difficult.
Based on this study, why aren't you vegan?
Based on this study, why aren't I vegan?
So let me rephrase that.
Okay.
Now that you've seen this study, are you considering becoming vegan?
No.
Why not?
For many reasons. Some that come to mind are just that, first, this is a very small study, and it's only two months. So there's that. I don't know how, if they followed the diet for a year, what would the outcome be? Maybe the calories would have started to level off once people got used to the vegan diet. I don't know. I also do have that concern with the calories not being equal, that it could be just that. I also have done diets myself where they're not vegan, but they're very low fat. And I have measured my LDL and it's dropped a lot based on just that. And it's not like you have to go vegan to reduce your LDL.
Right.
is what I'm saying. Like, there's definitely other factors that will do that, if that is your concern.
Gotcha.
And that is not my only concern. Maybe it is. It's a slight concern, but there's so many other things that are involved in how you choose a diet. And
right, like this outcome is just one of many, many things, and some other outcome might have been better with the omnivore group.
Right. I guess then the question is, like, is there anything in the study that would have pushed me to try a vegan diet? And I would probably say no. It's just too short and just one study.
Yeah.
And I would like to look at many more studies and, observational, more randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a good answer.
I think it's a great answer.
Well, you answer the question then.
If I'm going to be vegan based on this?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I don't quite understand what the clinical effects of LDL are. So even if that was solid, it's not like I eat a lot of meat. I don't understand why vegans have to always go to like such extreme that you eat none whatsoever. Why can't you like cut it down 90% and still be cool? Because like the thing that makes me want to be more vegetarian or vegan, or like move on that towards that on the spectrum, is how bad they treat the animals. I feel fine reducing it when I can, and I buy free range.
Yeah, it's not specifically just a health thing.
Yeah.
It can be animal welfare, things like that. And I think that is a common, what's the word I want? A common connection between the vegans and the carnivore diet people, or at least the vegetarians. They both they both ideally would want the animals raised better, not in factory farms.
Yeah.
Carnivore people generally, I would say, want high quality meat, which means grass fed, raised in pastures outside, things like that. And I think vegans would say that's not as good as what we want, but at least it's much better than factory farming. Oh, the last thing, the keto study?
The plaque against plaque?
Yeah. So do you know how this vegan study, they did a Netflix documentary?
Yeah.
Well, the keto one also has a documentary coming out.
On that study?
On that study.
Huh.
January, I think.
Are you gonna rage watch it?
Of course. It'll be fun.
But it's flawed.
I don't include this, but my theory is that maybe